spend the next 2 hours here. I can assure you it will pass very quickly. But we intend to stop at 10 o'clock. And in that format, I would make a few opening remarks if I do that. But I've brought the minister who is dealing with a particular matter of interest to us, a wide interest. The minister will speak for 10, 15 minutes and on an issue which is very current and very controversial, if you want to say. It has to do with the supply of water to the population. This is the minister responsible for water. When the minister is through, I will speak to the issue of the energy sector and the whole question of the world's pressures and the rising price of gas, and oil in particular, and the effect on Trinidad and Tobago. That should take us about, I would say, that should take us the first hour. And then after that, we leave the last 45 minutes of the 2-hour allocation for questions that will come from the floor here and that will come in from the social media platform. And that's how we intend to manage the time. So without further ado, I'd like to ask the minister to take the floor and speak about what you came to speak about, if there's a. And then when your 15 minutes is up, you see me reaching over here for some water. And then I will use the prerogative of the chair to take half an hour. And after that, we will then go to questions. And I would like to ask, I know that a million questions can be asked, but I expect that some of the questions that you will ask will deal with the issues that we're dealing with tonight. And if there are other questions, we'll try and reach them. But it's very easy to have 100 questions and none of them relate to anything that we've spoken about here tonight. But we'll try to keep it in that vein. And I want to say to the population, we are going to be doing this on a consistent basis going forward. And if you don't get in tonight, or if you don't get your issue dealt with tonight, rest assured that the future is there for all of us to get to it eventually. So, Minister, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and welcome to Lopino Borneo West. I also want to take the opportunity to welcome my cabinet colleagues, members of council, constituents of Lopino Borneo West, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago who are joining us on live television, radio, and social media platform. And let me also say Happy International Women's Day to all the beautiful and powerful women of Trinidad and Tobago. So, since my assumption as Minister of Public Utilities, the biggest headache I had from day one is the Water and Sewerage Authority. As a matter of fact, I said it when I took my oath of office and the media asked me, what am I going to do to turn around the water situation in Trinidad and Tobago? I told them that when I walked this campaign, I recall walking in the Sherwood Park area and the La Florissant area, asking people to vote for me. And on 2 occasions, people broke down in tears, and it touched me very deeply. There was one lady who informed me that she had a sick mother inside. For 2 weeks or 3 weeks, she didn't have water. And in Sherwood Park area, there were people who were telling me they didn't have water for 2 or 3 years. So when the Prime Minister asked me to serve in this capacity, especially me being a trained lawyer, having no understanding of hydrology or engineering, I thought I'm going to come into this ministry with a passion and a drive to understand why the people of Trinidad and Tobago cannot get an efficient and a reliable water supply. I came into the ministry, Prime Minister had asked me to chair a cabinet subcommittee to look into the operations of WASA and to make recommendations for its transformation. Minister Beckers and Minister Robinson-Regis were some of the experienced cabinet ministers that worked on that cabinet subcommittee with me. And it was a blessing in disguise because it gave me an opportunity to go deep into the bowels of WASA and to understand the various levels of dysfunction that existed there, that prevented the people of Trinidad and Tobago from getting an efficient water supply. The Prime Minister had asked me to deliver that report in 3 months, and by December month, the report was completed with recommendations. That report is now in the public domain. There's absolutely no reason for me to rehash the conclusion of that report. Safe to say that the report informed the people of Trinidad and Tobago that the levels of dysfunction within the Water and Sewerage Authority, it is unable to deliver upon its mandate, which is to provide the people of Trinidad and Tobago with an efficient water supply. And I would encourage the people of Trinidad and Tobago, if you haven't had sight of that report, to go and download it on the Parliament's website and look at the levels of dysfunction that we have discovered. Coming out of that, the Prime Minister reassembled another cabinet subcommittee under the leadership of Minister Penelope Beckles, a former Minister of Public Utilities, herself experienced cabinet minister, myself and some Minister Regis and some other ministers, to oversee the transformation, the strategic transformation of WASA. We put a new board of directors, and the mandate was to come up with a transformation plan. I'm happy to say that the transformation plan is finished, it's ready, and the Prime Minister had mandated us to meet with the unions representing WASA workers, and today we had a very successful meeting, a very positive meeting, Prime Minister, and as a matter of fact, after a 3/4 hour presentation, one of the union leader, he looked at us and he was like, the people of Trinidad and Tobago are still very fortunate to be having water flowing through their taps, because the situation is really bad. Now, after that report, I made it my business to go out and understand why the people of Trinidad and Tobago was not getting water. I visited a number of water treatment plants, the dams, the reservoirs, the booster stations, and all the other plants and the infrastructure that was responsible for giving the people of Trinidad and Tobago water. I just want to craft a clear understanding and a narrative for you so that you wouldn't go here without a basic understanding of why we are faced with this challenge. WASA is in the business of producing water. It has to extract the water from the ground or perhaps from aquifers or rivers. You have to treat the water, transmit the water through booster stations, high lifts, etc. Distribute the water to homes, to communities, etc. But over the years, or especially over the last 30 years, WASA has not been identifying new water sources. So whilst the HDC and private housing developments were busy constructing homes all over Trinidad and Tobago, and the population started growing all over Trinidad and Tobago, the water production capacity was not being increased at the same time. So you had growing demand on the resource, and at the same time you had declining production from WASA. Declining production because it has not been investing sufficiently in underground wells, despite all the hydrological reports that indicate that Trinidad and Tobago is not a water-stretched or water-stressed country. Trinidad is a water-rich country. As a matter of fact, we are just extracting 30% of the available water that we have at our disposal in our underground aquifers. So we have the water. So WASA has not been doing enough to increase its water capacity, whilst we are building communities all over Trinidad and Tobago. And whilst you build the communities, you're increasing your demand, your water production level is consistently declining because your infrastructure, almost every single plant in Trinidad and Tobago, WASA plant that is, they are producing water 50% below their capacity because WASA has not been engaging in predictive or preventative maintenance. So, Prime Minister, most of the plants around Trinidad and Tobago are producing water below 50% of their capacity. You are not doing anything to increase your water production. You have not leveraged on technology to measure the water that you are producing. So you don't have an idea as to the exact amount of water that you're producing. You don't have an idea as to the amount of water that you're losing in your transmission system. And while all of that dysfunction is taking place, the demand continues to grow, especially over the last 50 years. In Tucker Valley, working with the board of directors, we put together an independent team of engineers because, quite frankly, I started doubting every piece of advice that I was getting from WASA. Because I realized, I'll be very frank, if you go in there blindly and you're foolish, they will mislead you. Because it is institutional corruption. And corruption and mismanagement at a level that the people of Trinidad and Tobago facing the consequences of not having an efficient water supply. So you have, in one area, not producing enough water. But let me tell you what is happening in the Tucker Valley area. In the Tucker Valley area, the Tucker Valley plant, it is producing 4.3 million gallons of water. According to the data and the hydrological research that we have done and the modeling, the people that are served and the communities that are served by that Tucker Valley plant, they should be getting 24/7 water supply with 4.1 million gallons of water. But yet still I'm hearing complaints from Scorpion Village and Carnage and Glencoe and Westvale and all those areas, forwards, complaining for water. And when we got down inside of there, we realized that the booster stations that are responsible for transmitting the water, especially to those on the upper elevation, most of those booster stations are in a complete state of disrepair. Most of those booster stations, they do not have standby pumps. WASA is not engaged in preventative maintenance, so those pumps are breaking down every single day. And when they break down, they go to a store in St. Joseph and they stay there for weeks and months. And if the minister doesn't call and ask why the pump, Mr. Norberger will tell you, 4 o'clock in the morning, we have to be calling and asking for pumps to be installed. But whilst the plant is producing water there, the infrastructure is so terrible. And because you don't have standby pumps in place, communities go for weeks and months without water. So there's different levels of dysfunction. Let me take you to North Oropouche Water Treatment Plant. North Oropouche Water Treatment Plant is responsible for providing Sangre Grande with 10 million gallons of water on a daily basis. And then the remainder of the water, 10 million imperial million gallons of water, had to be shared along the east-west corridor straight down to in Maloney and Piaco and Five Rivers. North Oropouche plant is perhaps over 20 or 25 years old. Can you imagine how many communities that were constructed on the east-west corridor over that 20-year period? But yet still you have a plant still producing 20 million gallons of water, all kinds of developments taking place in Sangre Grande. But a plant is still producing 20 million gallons of water. That's the reason why you have to schedule the water. That's the reason why some communities have to get water 2 days a week and 3 days a week, because you are actually sharing that limited resource. And the people who live on upper elevation, well, they are feeling the brunt of it, because you have to take a different operation to get the water to the highest elevation. And the booster station that you have to depend on to get the water up to the highest elevation, they're in a state of disrepair. So it is dysfunction all over. We went deep into the operations of the WRA, the Water Resource Agency. And the Water Resource Agency is telling us, based on the latest models, that in the Sangre Grande area, you have the capacity to get 18 million gallons of water. So then why are you depending on North Oropouche if Sangre Grande alone can produce 18 imperial million gallons of water? In the Aripo area, mega watershed, 11 million gallons of water. In Cascade, St. Anne's, 10 million gallons of water. In the Maraval Bedrocks, 6 million gallons of water. In Chatham and Point Fortin, 12 or 15 million gallons of water. But we haven't done much to get that water, to serve people, and to deal with the increasing demands. The state of your infrastructure is really bad. Working together with the board, we said that we intend to tackle this problem at the deepest level. And therefore, we started talking to international partners. I worked closely with the Canadian High Commission over the last 7 months, and I can tell you that the first modular water treatment plant, we are about to sign a memorandum of understanding, Prime Minister. We'll come to Cabinet next week. And the Canadians, using modern technology, can get us a modular water treatment plant that has the capacity to produce 5 million gallons of water. We have identified the water source in central Trinidad, a huge reservoir of water that is holding over 650 million gallons of water, with the capacity to produce 5 million gallons of water on a daily basis, thereby treating with the issues in central Trinidad. Utilizing that approach, a modular water treatment plant can be brought into Trinidad and Tobago in 4 months. And we can get, by October month, 5 million gallons of water. If I get 5 million gallons of water to treat with central Trinidad, and we utilize the same approach, the modular water treatment plant, because that is what the world is doing. They are not constructing the normal water treatment plant that will take 5 or 10 years to be constructed. It has advanced significantly, and therefore we can get those plants built, constructed. Once you send your water parameters, they will design the plant to treat with the water quality that you have, and they can get me a water treatment plant in Trinidad and Tobago to put in Sangre Grande, whereby Sangre Grande can take care of its business of supplying Sangre Grande with water. And if I do that, it means that the 20 million gallons of water from North Puch, as opposed to having to be shared between the extremities of Sangre Grande and Manzanilla and Corial and those places, the 20 million gallons of water can come down the corridor, improving the people water supply from 3 days a week to close to 24/7 water. And we use the same approach in Grande, we use the same approach in Central Trinidad, we use the same approach in Point Fortin and Chatham, and in Maraval and in Tucker Valley. It means that the water that we have in our aquifers, working with our international partners, we can get about 10 modular water treatment plants and strategically place them around the country to improve the water supply across the country. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's a big issue facing WASA, which is its financial situation. WASA hasn't had a rate increase for 28 years. You cannot run a utility company where to extract and to treat water is costing you over $2 billion to get into people's home, and your rates is about $700 million that cannot even pay the salaries of workers. So how can you invest in technology? How can you engage in preventative maintenance and predictive maintenance? How can you ensure that your pipeline infrastructure, how can you ensure that your booster stations and all the infrastructure to get water to people, how can you ensure that you invest in modular water treatment plants to get additional water to supply the people of Trinidad and Tobago? So WASA is now faced with a situation where the government is saying that we cannot continue to invest that kind of, to pump that kind of money in WASA. Between 2010 and now, the government has spent over $23 billion in WASA. Most of that money going towards paying wages and salaries and desal water. 25 million gallons of desal water go into the domestic grid. The government is spending $1.25 US per cubic meter for water. And that is being sold to domestic customers at 3 US cents. So it's a downward spiral the company has found itself in. I can tell you that for the very first time in 20 years, WASA has produced a business model, a business plan, a cost of service study. It has also put together a capital investment program. And in 2 weeks' time, the company will be ready to submit to the RIC a justification for a rate increase. But we recognize that the people of Trinidad and Tobago, they don't want us to talk about a rate increase because they're saying, what am I paying an increased rate for? Because we are not getting the supply, and that is absolutely correct. And that is the reason why we decided to approach it or tackle it from 2 levels. improve water supply, and once you improve water supply, the people will tell you that they are prepared to pay for what they are getting. So if we improve the levels of service across Trinidad and Tobago, utilizing the model that I've just spoken to you about, then our rate increase will be more acceptable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But remember, WASA has to justify a rate increase. It is not going to the RIC and say we want a rate increase. WASA has to justify that it has the capacity to provide the people of Trinidad and Tobago with a reliable water supply, with a capital investment program. It can financially manage its affairs, and by so doing, the RIC can hold it to requisite standards. PM, I see you drinking water. I suspect you are thirsty, PM. I just need 2 minutes again. But I suspect he's just thirsty. But we are in a very good place because we now have a model to transform the utility company. We have prepared the utility company to go before the RIC to justify a rate increase to improve its financial circumstances without having to rely on the government to do basic maintenance. And we have embarked upon a program. As a matter of fact, I've worked with this plan, PM. It's the Strategic Action Plan for Water Supply Improvement to the Population over the short to medium term. And that plan will form the nucleus to develop a number of programs in northwest Trinidad, in northeast, in central, southwest, and in Tobago. Because WASA has been operating blindly. And over the last 6 months, we have gotten down to work. And we said that we have to hold the managers accountable to this very fundamental document. Identifying the issues, ensuring that they have preventative maintenance program in place to roll it out over the next 6 months. Ensuring that we go after the water sources that I have identified. And we have come up with a number of programs to be rolled out across Trinidad and Tobago. And the reason why we've decided to tackle it in that way is because every single region has its own unique challenges. So the challenges in Northwest are different from the challenges in Northeast. They're different from the challenges in Central, in South, and in Tobago. And therefore, the individual program would respond to the various challenges in the regions using the Strategic Action Plan as the guiding document to improve water supply across Trinidad and Tobago. In addition to what we have done over the last 3 months, we have started a robust leak repair program, and between November last year and February, Prime Minister, we have repaired nearly 6,000 leaks on WASA's distribution system and transmission system. 6,000 leaks. And despite the 6,000 leaks, we still have a backlog of 3,000 leaks. And I never imagined that leaks could have prevented people from getting an efficient water supply because it breaks down pressure and the water cannot go to communities on the upper levels. So we have done so. But we also know the problem with respect to road restoration. Because every time Ministry of Works pave a road, WASA appears. To the point that I see on Valentine's Day, hearts being shared on social media in the form of a leak in the road. I'm pleased to tell you that in 2 weeks' time, in every region, you will have experienced road paving contractors that as we repair all the leaks across the system, we will respond immediately to restore roads in a professional level. WASA call center operation is a source of headache to citizens. You have problems and you can't even call the utility company. In 1 month's time, we are going to revamp the call center operation. We are strategically working with TSTT to have a modern call center operation for WASA so that when people have problems, at least when they pick up the phone, they will hear someone listening to their concerns. So we are going to revamp the call center operation, and with the use of technology. Now, as I talk about technology, if I get all the water to give the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and I have to depend on a turncock man to open a valve to give you water, you have problems. There's a saying that in blind man country, what? One-eye man is king. Well, in WASA world, turncock man is king. That is going to come to an end, Prime Minister. Because I can tell you several times, people call complaining for water. It's not that you have water, you know. It's because the Turncock man forget to turn on the valve. We are going to digitize the operation of every single valve in Trinidad and Tobago. We will ensure that data loggers, we have already acquired the first 80, and in 2 months' time, the intention is to get 360 data loggers to be deployed all over the transmission system. And what are those data loggers? It will tell you when you have disruption on your system before complaints come to the minister to respond. Those data loggers will tell you when you have sufficient pressures on your system. It will tell you when communities are getting water in accord with their schedule. We are also going to digitize the operation of every single booster station. So whenever there is a breakdown, we don't have to hear a month after the community has not gotten water that, and Nehan would tell you, Fabo village and get water for 3 weeks. And this community, 5 Rivers, haven't gotten water for 6 weeks. And Simon will tell you in Diego Martin or wherever in central Trinidad and get water for how many weeks. So we are going to leverage technology and we are going to monitor the distribution system across Trinidad and Tobago utilizing modern technology, Prime Minister.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. That was a synopsis of what is going on in just one of the very many areas that require attention, that there is attention being made, and that forms part of the government's work program. I will ask you to hold your thoughts for a while, hold your questions for a little while, but I just want to begin my bits and pieces with you by telling you, listening to the minister, you may not believe. I have an idea what he's talking about. I spent 5 years on WASA board, 1981 to 86. And exactly what he's talking about then was the problem that we were dealing with then. And that is why as Prime Minister, I was very happy after the election results came out. Then I got somebody who had no connection, no understanding, no nothing to do with WASA, to be Minister of WASA. Because that is what the circumstances require. Because the establishment, there's something called, that is not how we do it. And only a brand new minister would be immune to that. When I was on WASA board, a statement was made to me once that never left my psyche. I was fighting some of the same issues that he mentioned here today. I'm talking about in the mid-80s. And the leader of WASA, management, very friendly person, said to me then, you are thinking you could solve this, but what you don't understand is that the board is temporary, the management is permanent. And that day I understood exactly what we were dealing with. And the problems are now being dealt with by a minister for whom WASA is virgin territory. And what you've heard about the government's program is what's going to take place. Of course, the resistance will be there. Some people's primary and singular concern is employment levels. The government is very concerned about that too, but also concerned about fit for purpose to deliver what you're paying for, what you're expecting, and what is like. So hold your thoughts, hold any question you may have. We'll come back to it in the question period if you would like to, because we'll preserve some time for that. But let me just say something. I want to go back to we talk about the journey with COVID, because I haven't been talking to you about the politics of managing COVID, except to tell you that I'm the only Prime Minister of this country that ever had to manage this country during a pandemic. And all those who have been giving us advice from day one, and you know what the advice has been, and who has been literally attempting to ensure that we did not succeed in managing COVID in a way that we could look back and exhale, but probably look back and see disaster. Let me tell you what the government did when we came into office in the last administration. In the very early days, we had a number of consultations because we sought to address the issues by first understanding them, and two, during the consultations, we brought in people to work in committees because that allowed you to add to what is in the cabinet or what is in each ministry. People who will come for a little while bringing skills and focus on particular problems, do a report, and then the government will have that, knowing that this literally codifies, right, or crystallizes the issue, and some decision programs could go into place, and then you move forward. One of the committees we had was a committee headed by Dr. Winston Welsh, and that committee's assignment was to examine the issue of healthcare delivery in Trinidad and Tobago. That was one of the committees. It worked in two parts. Very experienced group, headed by a very experienced patriot. They worked, they consulted widely and produced two pieces of document because it came in two parts, a first part and a second part. We took those documents to the parliament. This is before COVID ever was born. How do we look at and what is to be done to improve healthcare delivery in Trinidad and Tobago? Took it to the parliament and said it would be subject to the review and decision making of a joint select committee of the parliament, meaning government, opposition, and independents will use this piece of work, and the parliament will digest it, cogitate over it, and then the government having the responsibility to lead the country's decision making, the parliament would be involved in this issue of improving healthcare delivery in the country. That committee never functioned because it couldn't function. Because to get a joint select committee, it involves members of the government, members of the independents, members of the opposition. The government named its people. The independents were available. Mrs. Kamala Prasad Bissessa, leader of the opposition, flatly refused to name anybody to that committee. And therefore the committee was undermined and died before it did 1 minute of work. A committee that did an exercise about examining and making recommendations, some of them far-reaching recommendations about improving healthcare delivery in the country. That was the behavior of the opposition. And they succeeded in doing what they wanted to do, which was to make sure that the committee didn't function and no improvement would have come from that committee as a result of Parliament's work. Bam, come 2019, end of 2019, what are we faced with? A pandemic. And what do you think you're required to do now to provide the best healthcare available? Physical infrastructure, staff, systems, you are all required within 2 or 3 weeks. We heard about COVID, it was in China. Within 2 or 3 weeks it was here, and all hell broke loose across the world. And Trinidad and Tobago was required to call upon its healthcare system to deliver life-saving health care. Thank God we were able to do that. Thank God. But while we were doing it, I ask you to cast your mind back. How many times you went to the courthouse? I think about 60 times. Who was running out front, waving a flag that, somebody died from COVID when the first person died? Who was telling us that every single thing the government did was wrong? When we couldn't get vaccines, get vaccines, get vaccines, get vaccines. When we got the vaccine, hey, don't use them. Don't want to make all the guinea pig. And that was the approach. And it even got as far as attacking the doctors and nurses who were stretching out their hands, living their lives, exposing themselves to protecting the population. That is what we faced in health. As we speak now, our country is going through a trauma. We're grieving. There's nobody in this country who I think has not been touched and who have not felt the pain of those people who got sucked into that pipeline at Pointe-a-Pierre, at Paria. I don't think there's anybody in this country who could be so heartless as not to feel that. The government has a responsibility to ensure, as I've said to the families, in expressing deepest condolences from the government, to ensure that whatever happened there, we get to the bottom of it. And of course, whoever is responsible will be identified, and wherever there's responsibility and liabilities to be applied, they'll be applied. Civilized people. But of course, having said that, you would hear the accusation that the Prime Minister had said nothing. A commitment like that is nothing. But in the meantime, every ambulance chaser, every ghoul, every political opportunist, every 2x4 fireside lawyer who you haven't seen, hey, by the way, Pakas, glad to see you. Right? They're all out trying to make mayhem of a tragedy that has traumatized this country. The government's job is to facilitate and ensure that there is a proper investigation. Immediately the issue is who is to investigate. The government looks at what the assignment is and was fortunate to get 5 people, 2 of whom would have come from external, from areas where this kind of problem is an everyday issue, safety in pipelines in the energy industry. We asked Shell, we asked BP. Lend us one of your experts. Lend us one of your experts to look at this problem. We asked the Energy Chamber, name somebody to go on the committee. And we thought we had a team fit for purpose. What's the story? The minute you name the people, they come under sustained attack. Because according to the opposition, the loyal opposition, the only people in this country who have integrity and who would not cover up this disaster are the kleptocrats from the UNC. Everybody else will engage in cover-up, whether they come from Shell in Australia, whether they come from BP in Houston, whether they come from the Energy Chamber appointment. And how ridiculous is it? Why are you surprised? Recently, the president appointed a new police service commission. I could tell you, I don't know a single person on that commission. But in my duty as Prime Minister, I am to be consulted by the president, and if I have nothing against any of the people, I have no objection. And the president goes ahead under law and appoints. One of the persons that was appointed there is a woman whose husband is a banker. She's a professional person. And here the reason why the opposition leader launched an attack on that woman and excoriated the president for appointing her to the commission. The reason is that the woman, as an expert in her own field, did a job for a bank, and the bank had lent money to a businessman who is a friend of the Prime Minister. And on that basis, that woman was excoriated publicly, and she should not be there, and all kind of conspiracy theory about what we want to do in the Police Service Commission. I don't know the woman. The Energy Chamber picked their person, sent the name to the cabinet approved the person, and Mr. Eugene Tier suddenly became a target for the opposition. This is his expertise. This is his area of expertise. But as far as the opposition is concerned, he will come there to cover up for Paria and for the government. What is there to cover up? I don't know. A pipeline was there, it sucked in people, it killed people, maybe that didn't happen. We'll come out and tell you that didn't happen. As a result of that, as a result of the behavior of the opposition in slandering people, attacking people, The Energy Chamber has lost its person. Mr. Tia has pulled out, said, I will not do this assignment. The international companies have said, well, I don't think they need our help. And of course, I have come to the conclusion that nothing that the government does in appointing any committee, unless we appoint Gopi Singh, Ramdeen, Kamla and whoever else, nothing that the government does will satisfy the population that it has been properly done and that the findings are in fact fair and accurate assessments of the situation. I've come to that conclusion. As a matter of fact, I will not go now and ask many people to serve on a committee because I know what they'll tell me. Let me know. But a committee has to be put in place. What do we do? Where do we find these people from Mars who in this society, if you could go and disqualify somebody for being an employee who did a job in a bank, and that bank had lent money to a person who is supposed to be the friend of the Prime Minister and make a link to disqualify the person, where are we going to find people to serve on this committee? Who in this country in the energy sector are we going to find an energy sector that is owned by the government and has consistently been government control? Where are you going to find them? Help me out here. I'll tell you where we're going to find them. I have today instructed the Minister of Energy on behalf of the Cabinet to cancel the arrangement that was made public. And therefore there will be no 5-man committee of the experts that were made public. Because even before they've done the job, the population has been so riled up into not accepting any work that they've done, that's a waste of time now. And the next best thing is that, okay, we had given these experts 45 days to go down there, look at what has happened, tell us what has happened, and of course that wouldn't remove or change anybody's liability. It wouldn't change the fact that what happened, and who went in. That wasn't going to change it. It was just go there with your expertise. Tell us what happened, what shouldn't have happened, who is responsible, where the liabilities are, and where the improvements are to come. You have to cancel that. Are we going to have a commission of inquiry? Because apparently that is what will satisfy. A commission of inquiry. Because some people believe that let's play courthouse with it. We'll have an army of lawyers. We'll spend hundreds of millions of dollars if we can, certainly millions of dollars, and we will bring it into a commission of inquiry. The main reason, according to our colleagues, is that we'll be able to call and summon and cross-examine and all of these things. And of course, having done all of that, nobody's integrity will be at risk. Nobody's attempt to cover up, and we'll certainly get it done that way. So, the Cabinet will be approached to appoint a commission of inquiry. We will make it a 3-man commission. The same people that BP or Shell or EOG or Total or ANI will go to find experts to look at their situation if this happened in their company, the government of Trinidad and Tobago will go there and hire expertise there to be involved in this commission of inquiry. Because that may satisfy some people in this country, because nobody in Trinidad and Tobago who know anybody in the government, if your grandmother, cousin, and then neighbor is involved, is to cover up. And all kinds of, but what is in fact happening is that where there's hurt, where there's pain, it has been converted to politics of the worst kind. I'm not against anybody going and praying with anybody. I'm not against anybody defending their party officer in a situation, but to convert this hurt into the politics that has been converted into because of opportunities seen by some people. We don't see it so in this government. We see it that right-thinking people must know that we have in this country the ability to examine a situation like this. And if bringing in external experts will comfort those who believe that is only corruption and cover-up will take place, then we'll do that. because we want you to be comforted that whatever the finding is, those are the facts, those are the liabilities, these are the problems, and these are the recommendations for solutions. So there we go. In the next few days, you will hear more about this. Tonight, I want to talk to you about something else in the energy sector, because I spent the last few days delving and getting some information that is important to you. Today the price of oil reached $128 a barrel. And in Trinidad and Tobago, a lot of people see our future tied up with the price of oil. Price of oil go up and we're into a good thing. Price of oil go down and we're into a problem. I want this population to get information tonight so that we can properly address what is going on in the world and that is going to be affecting us directly and not as positively as the simple number sounds. Let me take you to the question of the volume of oil being produced in Trinidad and Tobago. Because it doesn't matter what the price is. If the volume is not significant, your capture from the marketplace is not going to be anything fantastic. It's all about volumes. Let me just very quickly state some undisputed facts for the population, because we are now engaged in dealing with the effects of higher oil prices. Especially, and I brought the data for you for oil production. 2007, 121,000 barrels per day. 2008, 114. 2010, 98. 2011, 91. 2012, 81,000. You would have gathered by now that Trinidad and Tobago, as an old, mature area for oil production, over time, coming from the height of 240,000 barrels a day at the refinery, but our local production has been going down, regardless of who was in office, in government. 2010, 98,000 barrels. And you would have heard our friends who are always filling up the media with information that is questionable, that the reason why we are in low production now is because the government has not increased oil production. But 2010, 98,000 barrels a day. 2011, 91,000 barrels per day. 2012, 81,000 barrels. 2015, 78,000 barrels. 2016, 71,000 barrels. 2018, 63,000 barrels. 2019, 58,000 barrels. 2020, 56,000 barrels. 2021, 59,000 barrels. So it has fallen from 2010, from 98, or 2007, 120, down to approximately 6,000 barrels per day. That is what we are getting from our mature fields. And it is not that oil is out there to pick up and we're not picking it up. This is the production level from the fields. 60,000 barrels per day. The reason why we had to close down the refinery is because as the production level was falling down to this, we had to be buying oil, crude oil, to refine because we weren't producing it. We were buying approximately 120,000 barrels per day. If the refinery was open and operating now, we would have been paying that $128 a barrel for 128,000 barrels per day to keep the refinery going, guaranteed to lose between $7 and $10 a barrel. You get my drift? In the meantime, let me take you across to the subsidy, because this is where all this is heading. In Trinidad and Tobago, the government subsidizes fuel. It didn't always do that. It's not done in Jamaica and Barbados and elsewhere. But in Trinidad and Tobago, because you are an oil producer, the government subsidizes fuel, which is take the price of fuel off from the people who using it so as to give them a benefit. And here how it goes. In 1997, government created something called a subsidy fund, meaning that anybody producing oil in the country, there was a levy that was attached to your gross production that you pay into the subsidy fund. So all the oil producers pay into it, and therefore you create a pool of money. And that money from the subsidy fund was then used to subsidize fuel for people in the country. So in 1997, that fund, that subsidy fund, had $157 million in it. Government paid out in subsidy $157 million. 1998 had 41 million. Government paid out 41 million. From the subsidy fund, there was no shortfall because the subsidy fund matched the subsidy itself, so there was no shortfall. And the subsidy was related to the price of oil. 1999, 19 million in the fund. The subsidy paid out was 19 million. 2001, that was the last year where the subsidy fund matched the subsidy paid out where there was no shortfall. Subsidy fund, 257 million. Subsidy to the population, 257 million. But by the next year, in that subsidy fund arrangement and the price of oil changing, the subsidy fund became lower than the subsidy to be paid given the oil price. So the very 2002, the subsidy fund had 154 million in it. But the subsidy to be paid was 296 million. The government then had to find 142 million to make up, to pay that subsidy at 296 million. And every year since then, that is what has been happening. That the subsidy fund could not pay the level of subsidy that was required. So the subsidies ranged in government payment over and above what was in the fund. The shortfall, let me tell you how the shortfall ran. 2000, so coming from no shortfall in 97 to 2001, when the system was put in place, started having a shortfall in 2002, 142 million. The following year, 23 million. 2004, 712 million. These are shortfalls that the government had to meet. And then between 2006 and 2012, it was in the order of $1 to $1.9 billion. The government had to find to add to the subsidy fund to affect the subsidy that we were all enjoying. Interestingly, oil price went up drastically in the period 2013-2012 thereabout. And the subsidy arrangement was still in place. That shortfall that was zero in the year 97 to 2001, that was 142 million in 2002. That was 1 billion in 2007, 2 billion in 2008, 1 billion in 2009, 900 million, less than a billion in 2010, 1.71 billion in 2011. The subsidy that was required because of the oil price arrangements and how much subsidies we are required to pay to keep the system the way you knew it. Subsidy in 2013 was 4.4 billion in shortfall. I want to repeat that. The actual subsidy was 4.9 billion. The fund only had in it 469 million. So it required $4.4 billion. Government paid it. No questions asked. An election is coming, So this level of subsidy should have been a conversation. It never was. The following year, the subsidy required was $7.2 billion. but the fund only had in it 273 million. It required 7 billion to pay the subsidy. The government paid it. No questions asked. The following year, the subsidy required was 5.4 billion. The fund only had in it 822 million. The government paid in that election year $4.58 billion. So in those 3 years, 2013, 2014, and 2015, the government of Trinidad and Tobago paid $16 billion in fuel subsidy. And the question that arises, is that the best way to spend $16 billion? Because nobody in this country says, I'm not making this trip because of the fuel cost to go downtown to Lime with my partner. Nobody says, okay, let me take 3 or 4 people as against one person. On the highway, one person in a car, down the road, no problem. Nobody relates to the cost of fuel in its real case because the government is carrying this. $16 billion in 36 months as a fuel subsidy. Nobody says, I'm not going to go down the road because I'll be caught in traffic, and in that traffic I'll be burning twice as much fuel as against making the trip a little later or a little earlier. No, not in this country. And of course, when we came in and money virtually ran out, couldn't pay public servants, we had to do something about this, because if this was allowed to continue, the country would have been bankrupt. $16 billion in 36 months. How could we have continued that? But the government that I led had to bite the bullet and begin to reduce and remove the subsidy. And you know how that was received. It was received as though the government wicked, the government bad, and there are certain people who want to march up and down, and the only conversation is how the government bad. Not that the country is heading into outright bankruptcy because the government is spending on an item that is sucking money in this way. And it's invisible. Eh? You don't see it because it happened and you didn't know. If I didn't tell you this tonight, you would never have known that we burned that in our cars in this country in 36 months. While at the same time, requiring money for everything else. We started reducing the subsidy and by 2018, there was no shortfall. We confined the subsidy to what was in the fund. The fund had $91 million in it, and we restructured in the budget the fuel arrangement so that we only paid out $91 million. That could have only happened because we structured it based on the oil price at the time. You may recall the oil price was low. Oil price was low, and in 2019, at one day, oil went to $0. Remember that story? So you were able to match the money in the fund with the subsidy because of a low price. When the price is high, that will change. So as the price of oil began to move up, the subsidy that you hear people saying that we remove subsidies, the subsidies started to move up. Because we still did maintain some subsidy on some aspect of the fuel. 2019, it moved from 0 in 2018. 2019, the subsidy shortfall which the government paid was $228 million. 2020, $492 million. 2021, $18 million. 2022, $20 million. In total, fellow citizens, here are the totals. In the period 1997 to today, the total fuel subsidy in this country was $38.1 billion. The fund that started the subsidy program contributed $9.3 billion. government provided the additional money for subsidy to the tune of $28.8 billion. And let me tell you now how it goes. Today, as I told you, the oil price has moved from where it was to where it is. I had the Ministry of Finance do some calculations to me for this information. If the oil price is at $110, the levy payments, the levy, at the government, the estimated levy would be $509 million. But the subsidy would be $2.9 billion. If it goes up to 125, where it is now in that area, the estimated subsidy would be in the order of $4 billion, and the fund will have in it about $600 million. If it goes up to $150, the government's liability in that situation for subsidy at the present prices would be $4.48 billion. Question is, can we find that money to subsidize fuel to insulate the population from this? That is the question we have to answer. That money is not available. We are not producing volumes of oil to say our earnings on the volume side would be large enough to provide the cash that you will get from the large volume, high price to put the subsidy. Let me tell you how it comes at the pump. Currently, the price at the pump for premium is $5.75 per liter. And super, $4.97, diesel is $3.51. If it's not subsidized, and oil is $100 a barrel, and I'm just using $100 for argument's sake because it's gone past 100 already. At $100, if there's no subsidy on premium, the price at the pump would have to be $7.58. It's $2 more than you're paying now per liter, if there's no subsidy. If there's no subsidy on super, and the price of oil is $100, the price at the pump is now $4.97, and unsubsidized price would be $7.46. And diesel, which you're paying $3.41 per liter for now, if there's no subsidy at $100 a barrel, the pump price will be $6.58. The question is, can the government or will the government allow the price of these fuels to jump from $5.75 to $7.58, $4.97 to $7.46, from $3.41 to $6.58? That is a huge shock to the economy. And government has to find that money from somewhere if we have to subsidize it. But if it's not subsidized, that is what it is. But the subsidy program is in place. And therefore, at $100, if we subsidize at the way it is being subsidized now, with no subsidy on premium and super, but subsidy on kerosene and diesel and LPG, the government will still have to find, at $100 a barrel, the government will still have to find $767 million. That is just to preserve the subsidy in the way it is now. And the question that we have to ask ourselves, if we have $767 million available, is subsidizing fuel the way to spend it? because you may have to borrow that money. To pay this subsidy, the Minister of Finance will have to engage in borrowing. And of course, the ministry tells me that the estimated figures for 2022, with oil price at $100, which is quite possible based on what's going on right now, even if you fall back a bit from 128 or 130, the estimated subsidy, we're looking at 896 million. The levy in the fund on the companies would be 459, and the government subsidy would be 437 million. So what all this means is that the government, through the Ministry of Finance, and the Minister of Finance is working on that right now, will have to take a decision as to how much funding we can find to subsidize, to take some pressure off the population. But the population cannot be insulated completely from oil running at 120, 130, 140 dollars per barrel. So in short, what I'm saying is that do not see the height in oil price as opening up huge possibilities for earnings, because the volumes at which we are producing oil now is not the same volumes we had before when the subsidy was absorbed. And let me just say one final point on this. It's not only oil that's a problem, because you might say, well, we're earning money in gas, and gas is our main hydrocarbon export. That's true. But here where we were in 2007, we were producing 4 billion cubic feet of gas for sale in 2007. Again, our fields are mature. We have not made any major finds in the recent years. We made some small finds, but much of it had not been as we had anticipated as your drilling programs went. 2008, 4 billion. 2009, 4.2 billion. And you may recall that 2008 was the best earning year in this country's history. 2010, 4.3 billion, and then it started to fall. 2011, 4.1 billion. 2012, 4.12 billion. 2013, 4.1 billion. 2014, 4 billion. 2015, 3.8 billion. 2016, 3.3 billion. 2017, 3.3 billion. 2019, 3.5 billion. Of course, 2020, 3 billion. 2021, 2.5 billion. And 2022, we are expecting to be at 2.7 billion. So between 2007 and 2021, our production of gas would have fallen from 4 billion, 4.3 billion in 2010 to 2.7 billion. That's the gas we have to sell. That's what the fields are producing. BP, our largest producer, we were relying on BP to increase its production or maintain its production so we could have kept Train 1 operating. BP came to report that our plans have failed, our fields have failed, and therefore our production will not be able to sustain Train 1 in the way it was being sustained. And we will not be able to provide the gas to get you back anywhere near 4 billion cubic feet. Those are the facts, people of Trinidad and Tobago. And anything else outside of that is wishful thinking or misinformation. What we have to do now as a government, as a people, is to digest this and make serious decisions as to how we manage to cut our suit, to suit this cloth, to ensure that we get the best of what is not the best situation. These are the facts that we are dealing with. And in the coming days, the government will say more on these matters as we, the government, the only entity in the country that is required to make these decisions and take the blows going with it. Because some people could only tell you what they want. Some people could only tell you what they think. Some could only tell you what they want you to hear, hoping that you believe what they're telling you. The government will tell you the facts, because the facts will be your circumstances, and we'll come out of it the way we are coming out of the COVID period, by confronting the facts, staying with the facts, and making sensible decisions. That is what's going to save this country. And having raised those two items, I would now, for the rest of the program, we'll listen to your questions. We'll ask you to be brief and concise with your questions, and we'll try to answer as concisely as we could. And if we don't answer it tonight, we'll take away your questions and we'll continue the conversation along the way. So for the rest until 10 o'clock, Hans, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Gonzalez. Ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open to you, as well as those of you online. Feel free to comment, and also feel free to send all the questions to opmtt.info@gmail.com. We look forward to your questions. So we're going to go first with a question from Kishan Patlu, MSc Urban and Regional Planning student. He says his question to the Honorable Prime Minister: Trinidad and Tobago's obligation to the Paris Agreement is to reduce our cumulative greenhouse gas emissions by 15% by 2030. Given this, he agrees with the government's position on reducing emissions from cars. However, instead of creating incentives for electric vehicles, his question is, why not put efforts into maximizing the potential of the public transport service, which would include primarily upgrading the bus service and providing a regulatory body for PH taxis. If more people use this mode of transportation, there'll be less cars on the road, meaning less emissions. Prime Minister?
As me, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, the question falls squarely into what we are advancing as a solution. You may recall that at one point we were pursuing CNG as an alternative to liquid fuel. That policy, one can say, is now pretty close to obsolete. It was never fully accepted by the driving population. And the question has a part of public transport.
Yes.
The government is, in fact, only today, I instructed the Minister of Energy to accelerate the government's program of searching for and obtaining our new fleet of electric buses in Trinidad and Tobago. And the government very soon will move towards ensuring that all public vehicles, not just buses, all public vehicles are electric. And the Ministry of Finance will move more aggressively to encourage the driving population to use electric vehicles, so that the benefit of electric vehicles will accrue to that target we set ourselves. And let me just point out something here as you've raised that. So, there's a bit of information here which is very interesting, which I saw today. It is this. We made some changes in 2016, and arising out of those changes, at the time when we made those changes in 2018, we were using 36 million liters of premium gasoline in this country. Last year, we used 105 million liters. You know what that means? It means that the cars on the road in Trinidad and Tobago are largely skewed towards vehicles that are using premium gasoline. That has to do with availability. Most of the cars that are being sold now, because of the technology of the engine, requires premium. So even as we talk about removing the subsidy, the consumption in the country of premium has gone up from 33 million liters of premium to 105. We've seen a decline in super from 687 million liters down to 452. Super. That is not because people are not choosing to use super, but the population of cars, of liquid fuel burning cars. So if we go electric, those cars that are in that bracket, burning 105 million liters, they are likely to be electric. And the electricity would be generated from local gas, local electricity, whereas it wouldn't be generated to drive these vehicles from imported liquid fuel. So right away, a policy is screaming at the government to move towards electric vehicles, and we have heard those screams. These numbers tell us that. And something else I discovered here tonight is that while we're not producing kerosene in this country, and I don't know who is using kerosene except probably aviation fuel. I'm seeing the consumption of kerosene moving from 7 million liters to 22 million liters. And I've asked the Ministry of Energy to understand and explain that. I don't know who is using it, where that is going. So that question is very timely, and the government is very focused on it. And the policies to come with electrification of our transport, public vehicles, and the general public. The one fly in the ointment is that electric vehicles are not easily available. But we expect that the market will improve in the coming months and years, and Trinidad and Tobago will be right there. And we're putting you on notice now. Begin to plan for the most efficient electric vehicle, because this country cannot go on ahead tripling its use of liquid fuel premium in the way it has done in the last 4 years.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We have a question from the audience at this point in time.
Good night. Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Prime Minister. Seeing that the economy and the energy sector is so challenged, I would like to know what are the government's plan in diversifying the economy, and if perchance the aluminium industry, the smelter, would be considered in the not too distant future, especially seeing that the price of aluminium is at $3,500, I think, a metric ton at this present time. And for the last 10 years, it has been steady, consistent, between $1,500 to $3,000 a metric ton. If the government would consider diversifying the economy and reconsidering going back into thinking about the diversifying the economy using the smelter or going into the smelting industry.
If the opportunity ever arises for the government to get involved in that business, the government will take the opportunity as long as it makes economic sense. And I answer in this way simply to tell you that we've missed the boat on that, and we're now on the shore waving at passing vessels. You could imagine if we had built that smelter in La Brea at the time when it was being built, and the price that you are quoting there today for something that is not oil and is not gas, what it would have been contributing to the economy. So we missed that boat. We are now talking to people who may or may not be interested in working with us on doing that. So we have not closed the door to it, but we are a long way from realizing that. And some things have changed to make it even more difficult. But we were right on the doorstep of an aluminium business. The TGU plant in La Brea was built precisely for that purpose. But by the time that plant was finished, politics had killed the idea, and we are now in a position where the most I can say to you is, if the opportunity arises, and we keep looking for opportunities, and to answer the first part of your question, what we'll do to diversify the economy? Everything else that we can do. Everything else that we can do, whether it is music, it is film, it is agriculture, it is whatever, we need to do everything that can be done. and not focus only on energy. But energy is so important as a contributor that we cannot but focus on it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We have another question from the audience at this point.
Good night, Honorable Prime Minister.
Good night.
MP for Lopino Bonnie West, who's doing a wonderful job, if I may say so. Darrell Rampasad, resident of Lopino Bonnie West.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Yes, Darrell Rampasad, resident of Lopino Bonnie West. And I came today with a different question. I was prepared with a different question. But I will ask, right, what are the plans right now? And we have seen that under the Ministry of Youths, that there is a wonderful program, the Agriculture Homestead Program. What are the plans for the youths who are graduating from UTT and the University of the West Indies in the future in terms of agriculture for employment? And is there any plan by the government of Trinidad and Tobago for agro-processing and exporting of said products in agro-processing?
The answer to both questions is yes. We are aiming to marry the trained personnel with land where land is required, and of course also with the technology which is available now where you don't have to have land to plant in the soil. Modern technology allows you to do a lot of food production without soil. So some of these people who are going to be trained in some of the programs that we are actively engaged in, you are aware that there's a program of land preparation and distribution with people who are being trained. We are restarting the youth camp programs. But there's something up here in the Mausika area, there's something in Palo Seco, there's something to come in Chagaramas, so those programs are actually underway. That's why we created the ministry, Mr. Minister Cummings is in now. He's actively engaged in doing that. And what we have understood is that we've lost a generation of farmers. And therefore, we are encouraging young people now to get involved in agriculture in all its forms and fashions, especially using the manageable technologies. So you will be seeing some marriage between the trained young people in these programs and the availability of land where land is available, or the use of technology where the funding is available to produce the technological arrangements that doesn't involve soil. If you look at how lettuce and tomatoes are grown now in substrates that are fiber, and the hydroponic systems and all those kinds of things, agriculture in the 21st century is not just drudgery and sweat. And some of those young people, not all of them will continue, but we expect to produce a population of new farmers in that way. And those programs are underway, and I'm glad that you've noticed them and encourage the young people to get involved, because that is what we want them to do. A good living can be made in there, because food production, right, is an integral part of diversification and security for the nation.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much for your question, Darrell. We take another one from the audience.
Good evening to you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Good evening.
Good evening to everybody, all protocols. My name is Nanlal Jadu. I am also from the Bonnet Farmers Association. And one question I wanted to find out, the status, what we having problems with acquiring leases for the lands at Bonnet. They have a disconnect between the QREP office and the state land office at Tower. So anytime we call, nobody seems to know what's going on really. So I don't know if we have our MP looking at it, but I think that he might need some higher up help from you. Before you answer, Mr. Prime Minister, the other question, very short. I had asked you this question 4 years ago. I wanted to ask you again tonight. The status to implement the death penalty in this country.
Okay, let me answer the first question. My cabinet colleagues here will tell you, every Thursday at cabinet, a significant component of the notes before the cabinet to be approved are land leases. Because this government, under Minister Rambarat, we have focused on the problem that you have raised. I don't know where they are with respect to Bonaire per se, but nationwide, we have been focusing, and some people who have been in your position for 20, 30 years have been getting their leases, because the Ministry of Lands have been working on it, and we have produced a lot of leases and will continue. And your MP can interface with the minister to answer your question more directly, where the lands in Bonaire are in the program, because we are in fact aware and work is going on. And every single Thursday, before I came up here tonight, my cabinet box came to me, and I can guarantee you, in that box are a number of leases from somewhere in this country requiring cabinet approval, and those persons will get their leases when cabinet approves them tomorrow. I will get the data on that and make it public, and you will see the work that Minister Rambarat has done in the last 5, 6 years to give people leases all over the country, and that program is continuing. Okay? The other question you asked me, sir, we are further away from the death penalty now than we were. Because, let me put it in simple language, it is not a matter for the government. The government has done what the government can do. Our highest court of appeal in Trinidad and Tobago is the Privy Council in England. These English people do not support the existence of the death penalty. And therefore, when the appeal is made to them, as it is done automatically by every person who is convicted of the most heinous crime or whatever, when it goes to our highest court, all it does is cost us millions of dollars, and the Privy Council puts obstacles in our way. The last arrangement was that if a person is not hanged inside of 5 years of conviction, then it must be vitiated to that. And of course, who determines that 5 year? The state trying to get it done, while the person is appealing. One of those appeals is to a body, the Inter-American body, which publicly, a regional body of which we are a member, that agency publicly opposes the death penalty and publicly chastises the country for having a death penalty. And once they appeal there, that's another story. And I have not even touched on the judicial system, which, for one reason or the other, which we're going to set aside a date for that. The delivery of justice in Trinidad and Tobago is unacceptably slow. I have been Prime Minister of this country for 7 years, and I have given the judiciary priority. Hundreds of millions of dollars in resources. I ensured that the parliament that was not being repaired, it was there with 15 years of scaffolding around it. One of the accomplishments of this government was to ensure that the parliament was repaired to completion, and that we move into the parliament. We now have a functioning parliament in the Red House. But what the government also did is that the space that the parliament was occupying down on the waterfront, we have made that entire space available to the judiciary to have 75 additional courts. We've increased the number of masters, we've increased the number of judges, we've removed from the judicial system 100 and something thousand motor car cases. We are now not going before judges and magistrates because somebody taillight was bad or somebody bounced a fender. We are giving people points now for breaking a major road or for driving on a one-way road. Hundreds of thousands of cases out of the system. We've done all of that and many more. And I'm going to ask the Attorney General to report to the country what we have done. And I could tell you, as a citizen, I have not seen any acceleration in the delivery of justice in this country. The cabinet has done everything that we could have done to facilitate it. So there must be something somewhere else. As a matter of fact, you know, if somebody owes you money now and they don't want to pay, you know what they tell you? me to court now. And the delay in the system, whatever the cause, whatever the reason, I can't or won't put my finger on it tonight, but whatever the reason, the best friend of the person who has to answer a charge before the court in Trinidad and Tobago today is Mr. Delay. Delay, 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 delay. Last week I was shocked when I saw the state going to the court as prosecutor to ask for an extension on a matter that has been languishing for 7 years. It's bad enough when the criminal is using the delay system, because if you have no defense, delay is your friend. You don't want any day in court if your defense is weak or you think you can be found guilty. Of course you want delay. But when a matter is before the court for 7 years and the state comes up and asks for an extension, well, I was absolutely astounded when I saw a magistrate saying, no, this matter has to go on. And I'm telling you this against the background where there's one particular matter which has been going on in preliminary inquiry now for almost 20 years. I don't know what that means. It certainly does not mean that the cabinet has not done what the cabinet could do. There's something else in the mortar than the pestle. And this delay in justice in Trinidad and Tobago is hurting us in more ways than one, and we have to find a way. We have to find a way to remove that from the system. It's not fair to the persons in Romania to be lying down there for how many years waiting for a day in court. What is the reason? I would say there's no resources, but what are we doing with the resources we have? You might not have all the resources you need, and I expect to be criticized for making these comments. I'm simply addressing the state of affairs in Trinidad and Tobago. And there's no sacred cow in this country. The same way others in a separation of powers could criticize the government, I am taking issue with this situation where the government has done everything that we think we could have done in the resources available to us. And as a citizen, I'm simply saying, I am not seeing the benefits of what we have been investing in this system. And I say no more tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chadu. We have a lady in the audience who'd like to say Happy International Women's Day to you.
Thank you.
As you continue to break the bias.
Oh. Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister. Good evening, Honorable...
Wait a minute. No, nobody wants to talk about WASA Minister.
I have a question. Okay.
Not that I'm shirking my responsibility.
Right.
But the minister is getting a pass, right?
Yeah. Prime Minister, I'm very proud that you're the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago during this pandemic. And for those people, I appreciate everything you have said today, and these conversations, it is real. We can't say anything better than that. So with that in mind, I would like to say goodnight to the cabinet ministers. I can't call everybody's name. Honorable Mr. Dial Singh is from my hometown, St. Joseph. So, with regards to WASA and the transformation, how will it affect the current staffing?
How will it affect?
The current staffing, the transformation process at WASA.
Staffing?
Yes.
The current staffing?
Current staffing at WASA,
well, let's put it this way, right? Let's put it this way. Nobody ought to be employing anybody who is not to make a contribution to the workplace. And if the workplace has a requirement for 1,000 people, those 1,000 people will find their place in there because you require people. Right. What you have to do is to make sure that you have only what you require and that the ones that you require do what they're supposed to do. And if that happens, then we are much, much better off. It's not a question of, well, all we'll be interested in is maintaining a huge labor force. I'll tell you something. Sometime in, I can't remember the year, we had a voluntary separation at WASA, 2013. And a number of staff members took the voluntary separation because there was a requirement to reduce the staff. Because what was happening before, every project WASA had anywhere, WASA took on labor in that project. When the project came to an end, the temporary workers were retained because everybody wants somebody to have an opportunity to be employed. But if that's the system you're using, there comes a time when you would have oversupplied yourself. And then we asked people to agree to go in the separation, and they were paid and so on. And a number of persons, Minister, you have the actual numbers, right? Could you tell the lady the numbers that went and what happened after?
So, in 2013, the UNC government attempted, or rather, they went to the IDB and they told the IDB they needed some funds to restructure WASA and to engage in a program of wastewater rehabilitation and construction of plants, etc. The IDB informed the then CEO, which is Ganga Singh, that if you were to have access to these funds, you need to present a restructuring plan for the Water and Sewage Authority. The document that we have, Mr. Ganga Singh informed the IDB, presented rather a draft transformation plan, and informed the IDB that WASA is overstaffed by 2,500 employees, and that the UNC government would engage in a restructuring exercise to reduce the employee figure by 2,500 employees. They got access to $360 million to do a VSEP program. 1,200 employees participated in that VSEP program, so obviously you would have expected that by 2015, the staff would have been reduced from nearly 5,000 to 3,000 something. And by 2015, after 1,200 employees participated in that VSEP program, the employee headcount remained at 5,000. And it cost the people of this country $350 million.
So in short, what happened in a proper program of restructuring, we gave people VSEP and hired back an equivalent number of people. But I wanted to be very clear. The issue about WASA is not simply an issue about staff levels. WASA is going to be an employer of people. WASA will have to employ large numbers of people. But it will do so in an efficient way. And that's what the VSEP was about. Voluntary separation had been effected. But if the government then goes immediately after and rehires into the program, what do you think you're going to end up with? And we are focusing on both maintaining the staff levels. Some of them are specialist people who you would need. And some of the people who are there doing A now are required to do B and C. And all of those things have to be taken into account. But if you have to ensure that you only use up the resources that you are required to use up, then there are going to be some improvements, there are going to be some consequences, there are going to be some changes. The one thing that we cannot do is to say, leave it so. Because every year the government has to find an additional $2 billion to put into WASA, the very said WASA that is, as described by the minister, who can't give people water. WASA exists to give people a supply of water, and that is what we're going to focus on. And to do that, you also have to focus on people.
Thank you so much for your question. Melissa James online is asking, or stating rather, Honorable Prime Minister, there seems to be a significant lack of flights on the domestic air bridge, and flights are always booked up for weeks in advance. You said that Tobago is open for business. However, people wishing to travel to and from Tobago simply cannot do so. The boat is not always the best option for travel to conduct business or to attend an appointment. Citizens are forced to wait on standby at the airport, and Tobagonians in particular who want to travel abroad are forced to take whatever flights they can get to Trinidad and must wait for hours at Piarco to board their connecting flights with other airlines. Honorable Prime Minister, can you please address the lack of flights on the domestic air bridge?
Yes, well, the demand peaks on the flight, but I think there's a fundamental problem here. It is not feasible to have an airline seat available to every person at the convenience of every person to travel when they want to travel. Every person. What you have when you run an airline, you have a number of planes, and you could increase the number of planes, and you have a flight schedule, you have a schedule, how often these planes go, and that gives you the number of seats that are available. Sometimes those seats are not utilized because the population doesn't have a large demand for it. Other times, they have 5 times the demand. I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of planes in America, but Thanksgiving weekend, you can't get a flight because everybody wants to travel that weekend. So what we have in place is a steady schedule, and we have increased the number of planes, we've increased the schedule, and at peak times, we will continue to increase it. Like we're coming up to Easter. I expect that very soon, Carl will put out a new schedule that will take into account an increased usage in Easter. But even then, we don't expect to have a seat for everybody. What we have done, though, we just spent $1 billion. $1 billion we just spent providing Tobago with the 2 most modern fast ferries in the world. And we have given the people of Tobago a choice. And that choice, every day those 2 ferries, in fact we have 4 ferries, but those 2 in particular are running between Scarborough and Port of Spain, and they're the planes at the airport. So, in short, the supply of transportation between Trinidad and Tobago will have to be a mix between sea transport and air transport. The sea transport can carry large volumes, and the air transport will carry smaller volumes. And then it comes down to preference and reasonable capacity. And we will try to increase at the peak times, because if you maintain the peak flight schedule when the demand is low, then you are literally burning up, wasting money. So Carl tries to balance that, and we will try to do the best that we can there.
Thank you very much. We have another question from the audience.
Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Minister Gonzalez, pleasant good evening all. My question this evening, can we expect the government to revisit the development of a mass transit system? This is in light of the subsidy, and could you highlight the effects that that would actually have on the subsidy? I have another question.
Wait, let me ask you a question. You talk mass transit, you mean like a train or a bus transportation?
Well, yeah, train system basically.
Okay, well, we've looked at the mass transit by train in great detail. That was one of the things that we committed to do in 2015. When we were in the election campaign, then we looked at it, we brought in experts, we spent quite a number of months analyzing it, and we came to the conclusion that it was not feasible simply by not being affordable. And then the alternative is still on the table to have mass transportation in Trinidad by bus. So we're still talking about an improved bus service, an outreach bus service, and a bus service that is supplied largely by the private sector in some areas through the maxi-taxi system. But we don't have on the table now any plan for a train system, but we do have intentions to consider a strengthening of the bus service, the public bus service.
Thank you. No, good. Thank you, PM. Let's get a round of applause for that answer. And I understand you have another question, so proceed.
And my second question is with regards to the subsidy, and we are looking at reducing our emissions, right? Greenhouse system, the generation of green energy, all right? And there's a system, a hybrid system that integrates electrical grid power along with residential homes basically putting up a solar panel, etc. And some homes could even produce even more than they need. Would we see in the future regulations that would allow for even the domestic user to supply excess power back to the grid? Is that something that we would see in the future?
Yes, the minister could comment on that.
So I can tell you that this has been something the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs and Ministry of Public Utilities and TNTech have all been working on developing a comprehensive policy on the feed-in tariff arrangement that you're talking about, which is to allow people to generate their own electricity utilizing renewable energy like solar, etc. And the excess energy, they can transfer it onto the national grid. There's one particular issue that needs to be resolved, which is who is going to pay for that electricity and that power. Is it TNTech? And if it is TNTech, what is the arrangement you're going to put in place to price that from TNTech? Because of course it is going to be an extra burden on TNTech to receive that extra power from private suppliers in addition to the power purchase agreements that they already have, which is costing TNTech billions of dollars. And the Prime Minister will also tell you that TNTech is owing NGC the tune of $5 billion because they are not paying for the gas that they're getting from NGC. That is something that we also have to tackle in addition to what the Prime Minister said. So the policy on this feed-in tariff arrangement is well advanced, and as soon as we're able to settle on this particular item, we will be advancing to Cabinet a policy to amend the TNTech Act to make that arrangement, to allow people to get that extra electricity back onto the national grid.
But just to conclude your question, over and above the small quantities that are to be that eventually will be produced from persons who are supplying their homes and they produce extra, as part of the greening of the country's energy base, we are currently engaged through our international commitment, and we went out through a tender process, we invited proposals, and we settled on the production of, I think it's 110 megawatts of power being produced by two major companies, BP and Shell, in Trinidad and Tobago, which is green energy, which will come into the grid on that scale. So the country's profile will begin to improve in that way. And of course, finally, the point I want to make is this. It is very difficult in an environment of cheap fuel and subsidized fuel, the way I described a while ago, to get people to move themselves into doing what you have just said. In environments where people are facing a different pricing arrangement, a lot of people moved in that way because it was beneficial to them immediately to do that. But in Trinidad and Tobago, the conversation and the culture is not yet one of, hey, my fuel price is too big, what can I do about it? And we now, especially in the current environment, we have to carry that conversation because the world is changing fast around us. Our oil fields, our gas fields are changing around us, and we will not always be in a position to enjoy the benefits of the kinds of support that you've been enjoying in the last, 20 years ago and so, when things were different.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And as we're talking future, we have a question online. Prime Minister, you said that you want more children to return to school next month. Parents are anxiously awaiting the announcement of the schedule for primary school children. When will we hear some of the details?
The reason why the minister is not here is because the minister is busy working.
She's actually here.
Minister, where are you? Come say a word or two on that. But just don't compromise. There's a mic down there. Just remember that the cabinet hasn't completed your program as yet, right? Because I am not the cabinet.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Prime Minister.
Good night.
Colleagues and residents and our viewers and listeners. With respect to what happens to school, you would notice that there's a pattern. The Ministry of Education would engage our stakeholders. We have serious stakeholders. We have the parents, we have the teachers, the nominational boards, we have the principals associations, and all of that, we have to consult our stakeholders to discuss exactly how we are going to operationalize. It is one thing to make policy, it's another thing for the schools, the people who are actually on the ground, to be able to carry out whatever the policy is. So that is an important part of what we do. We consult with the stakeholders. Sometimes more than once, we go back and forth, and then we will put out clear guidelines, a press release, so that not only the schools will be apprised, but the general public will know, because we are all partners in this. Parents have become extremely important, and it's important for a parent to understand exactly what's happening with their children, important for principals to understand, important for the school boards and everyone else, teachers. So that is how we will go. The Prime Minister has made the pronouncement. It is now for us to discuss within the ministry what exactly is happening, put a position forward to our stakeholders for them to comment on that, and for us to have a holistic discussion, and then we come to a decision. So very soon, I know parents are very anxious, very soon there will be further communication from the ministry with respect to that, and of course, whatever is suggested and recommended has to pass by the Prime Minister, and so that we have a clear understanding, and the officials of the Ministry of Health. Remember, in all of this, we are still in a pandemic, and though restrictions are being lifted, all of that has to go into the pot for consideration. So, as has been the practice, the public will be apprised, but certainly only after we deal with our stakeholders and we have a clear plan for how we move forward.
Thank you very much.
Let me just say one thing on that. All that we are doing, the approach is to try and get our children out to school as quickly as possible, all of them. But that will be influenced by the state that the country is in with respect to the virus infection. Once we are convinced that the risk is acceptable, we will try to bring out all our children as quickly as possible over the time frame the minister mentioned, that kind of time frame. If, on the other hand, as it's happening in one particular country which was called a bastion, where the COVID is only now breaking out there again in the way that we had it before. If a new variant comes out and changes the condition, well, then those plans will have to be adjusted. But let us assume for one moment that things will go the way the Minister of Health thinks it will go, which is that COVID will become less and less of a threat. Then we will want to bring our children out back to school, because it is one of the traumas of COVID that I live with every day, and I would really like to have that behind us. And once there is a good decision to be made, we'll make it.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Education. Can we have a round of applause for both of those answers? So we are just past 10 o'clock, 2 minutes past 10 o'clock. Yes, as you promised, time went by quite quickly. So we will actually take 2 questions from the audience and 1 online before we wrap up. So we go to the gentleman to my left.
Thank you very much, and good evening to the Honourable Prime Minister and my Member of Parliament and fellow members of Cabinet. My name is Shane John, President of the Trinidad Youth Council and also resident of Cleaver Road, Arima, within the Lupino Bonnie West constituency. And I must say thank you to the Honourable Prime Minister as well as the Member of Parliament, Minister Marvin Gonzalez, someone that represents us well. Thank you for the opportunity this evening. And question to the Honourable Prime Minister. You spoke a lot about youth, and as the President of the Council, I'm very, very happy to hear about youth. But one of the challenges with our economy is that the World Bank speaks about Trinidad and Tobago being ranked at 106 out of 190 countries in terms of being able to access business, or the ease of which we do business in Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of young entrepreneurs are interested in getting involved in business. What grants are available for young people at this time in terms of entrepreneurship, as well as, if not grants, what is the government doing? I mean, I must commend the move for agriculture in our country at this time in terms of the homestead program under the Ministry of Youth, but what else is being done to access ease of business for young people in Trinidad and Tobago? Thank you.
Well, the first thing that has to be done is to create an environment which is attractive to attract the young people. You can't just send them off to do business. Something has to attract their attention. And that attraction comes in a variety of ways. They would see some things that are happening, publicized either in the public or the private sector, and they decide that they want to participate. So we open the door to opportunities in all these areas, public and private sector. And of course, sometimes it requires resources which those attracted people don't have. And then the government provides a pool of funds and a package of programs to provide those resources so that where you are attracted to or where you have been magnetized to, then you get help. And there are a lot of programs through the Ministry of Trade and Ministry of Agriculture. The problem that we are facing is that many of these programs are not utilized. That's one of the problems. The programs are there. The training programs are there. Some people might get trained, but after they're trained, they don't stay the course. Either because they've been discouraged from something that happened, or the market may have changed, or they may have changed their minds. But suffice it to say that there are a number of programs in the ministries, whether it is programs for training, programs for financing, programs for partnering, programs for making available space. And what we are trying to do is to encourage people to use these programs. Somebody mentioned a while ago agro-processing. In the south of Trinidad, in an agricultural area, we just spent 2 years ago $93 million creating an agro park. And then what that is supposed to do is attract people to produce the raw material and then prepare in the park the finished product for the market. And there's a lot of assistance available in agriculture and in trade and in all kinds of training to encourage young people. We try to encourage young people to step into these breaches.
Thank you very much.
Good night, Mr. Prime Minister, MP, Mr. Gonzalez, ladies and gentlemen. We spoke a lot about young people, and I saw initially there was a bit of confusion in terms of the effect it would have on us, the war with Ukraine and Russia, and if it does have an effect at all, what are we doing to mitigate it?
No, it's going to have a huge effect on us. It is having a huge effect on us. And as long as that disturbance takes place, we are to begin to steel ourselves because we are going to be affected. Let me give you one little example. In Trinidad and Tobago, is doubles, talk about doubles and roti. We love flour in this country. Bread and oil. The bulk of the flour that we eat comes from the world market. Ukraine is one of the biggest producers of wheat in the world. So is Russia. Two of them fighting now, and the killing fields are in fact the wheat fields in Ukraine. It is now March. Spring planting is supposed to begin next month. Even the wheat that is available now in Ukraine, you can't ship it out because it can't get out through the ports in Odessa. Odessa is a battlefield right now. That is affecting the market. And if we manage to get that wheat into the market, thank God, but who is going to plant in the battlefield now? And that means if you don't plant in Ukraine now, next year, that production of wheat from Ukraine wouldn't be available. Argentina might be able to produce a bit more in the United States, but the market is not going to be the same if you lose the Ukraine. That's only one situation. And we're going to have to buy that wheat out there, paying the new price, because there's a shortage or unavailability, the price is going to go up. We have to buy it out there, we bring it into Trinidad and Tobago, mill it into flour, and then of course, we can't expect to pay the same price we are paying when those increased costs. And I haven't added to the cost, the transportation, the energy cost, because everybody everywhere in the world who is providing us with anything that we import, they use energy to do it. Whether it's a part, a place to go, an airline ticket. So as long as the energy price is going up, the things that we are going to be buying are going to be influenced by those higher prices. And we are a country that imports a lot into our economy. So you watch the war on television, it's coming straight into our pockets, into our homes, and it's turmoil in the world. And nobody's insulated from it, nobody. So we have to make some decisions as to how right, we are going to respond to it as we go along. For example, one of the things that has happened this is a COVID issue, where transportation costs have gone through the roof because the people who control containers just jacked the price up. A container that was costing $4,500 or $5,000 to get to Trinidad and Tobago from China, that price rose and it went up to about $17,000 in some instances. The container, not the goods, the container. People who are involved in food production in this country had to go to America, pay an extra $5,000 to get an empty container available to put the raw material in, to bring it to Trinidad and Tobago to produce the food that we take for granted. Right? So those are the kinds of things that are happening. And we will have to adjust ourselves to, one, understand that we are price takers here. Two, produce as much as we could within our border. Or three, find substitute markets where they're available, but we are all out there with the rest of the world. It's not peculiar to us. It's something everybody else is experiencing, and therefore we are out there competing and jockeying with them for it, including food.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your question. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that we have actually run out of time, and we really want to thank you for being here with us this evening in person and online. Prime Minister, closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Hans. I simply want to thank all of you for coming and being here and with us. Makes it so much more lively and allowing us to talk to the population on these issues that we have raised. Certainly we have not exhausted the discussion, we have not exhausted the explanations, we are not prepared to hide anything from the population, and therefore I want to give the population the assurance that we will do more and more of this as part of our communication with the public, and we trust that the information we provided, if it didn't satisfy you in totality, we hope that it will have stimulated you to begin to think on these things. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, good night. May you reach home safely, and may the good Lord bless you. Good night.
This is TTT. Live for local.